Hey everyone, what's up? What's going on? My name's Joe, and this week we're going to be reviewing Bohemian Rhapsody. But first, an announcement. Now, if any of you guys have been following us on any of our social media outlets, you probably already know that we've released our first episode of our brand new series, Goldfingers, this past Tuesday. If this is your first time hearing about it, Goldfingers is a data-driven Oscar predictions video series created by our very own co-host, Mike King. You can check out the first episode right now on YouTube, and you can find our YouTube by searching for our name, How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up, the podcast, on YouTube, or I'm sure you can also find a link to the episode via our website, howmanyfingerspodcast.com. Also, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube so you never miss an episode. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy that, and I hope you guys enjoy this, our review of Bohemian Rhapsody.
Hi, I'm Mike.
And I'm Joe.
And you're listening to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up, the podcast. And this week, we're reviewing Bohemian Rhapsody.
One of the absolute greatest.
Oh, no, I'm talking about the movie.
One of the absolute worst.
Welcome to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up, featuring two guys getting scaramooshed and reviewing movies in a weekly podcast form.
And Riley Slate left that for us on Facebook.
Yes, thank you, Riley. Came in right under the gun a day before we recorded this.
I think she went back to one of those like statuses where we asked for synonyms because she knew we were reviewing this movie.
Yeah, so if you would like to be like Riley and suggest a synonym, make sure you follow us on Facebook, first of all. And then you can suggest them on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, send one to our email, send one to our Snapchat. Really, any way you can get in contact with us, we'd love to put your synonyms on our big-ass list to be read on the podcast eventually. But let's talk beer. Let's rap about some beer for a minute here, Joe.
Hey, let's get to what we're all thinking about right now. Let's get to beer, huh? So this week, we got many young brewing companies wondering, wait, don't care how it tastes, just care how it makes me feel. Huh? Let's open this up. Welcome to Beer Talk. We were in like a beer store like last night, and I was like looking around for a beer that would fit one of these movies, and I never really found that. This kind of reminded me of like the First Man-ish kind of scene. I don't know.
Wandering around the surface of the moon.
Just a fucking stretch. Yeah. But yeah, Wandering Wit.
I also know this is one of the cheaper beers sold, because every time you went to like the
the Acme across the street. Yeah.
Whenever I go there and look for a beer, there's always like Manayunk sells their stuff pretty cheap there for some reason.
Well,
so I've looked at this one and opted for either another Manayunk or something else multiple times.
Yeah, Manayunk also sells like 4 beers for $10, so it's like it's kind of but this is I feel like I always try to they just make interesting stuff. They made the kind of like...
They do the crunch beers that you brought on before.
Right, like the peanut butter cup one and
mint chocolate chip one,
which wasn't as good. This is white beer, Belgian style wheat beer.
Wit beer.
Wheat beer.
It's a wandering wit.
And this kind of just... I'm kind of a little disappointed. It's just kind of...
I actually kind of like this compared to a lot of wit beers that I've had before, because it's not too heavy on the sour aspect of it.
Yeah, I get that. I think maybe I just don't like the...
Is it worth $10.99 for a 4-pack? Let's find out.
I think so.
All right, so let me read this IMDb description for Bohemian Rhapsody. and then Joe's going to give us his Joe notes. A chronicle of the years leading up to Queen's legendary appearance at the Live Aid concert. Is that even a sentence? That's just like one.
I can't believe it ended like that.
Participle. A chronicle of the years leading up to Queen's legendary. That's just. Yeah.
Okay then. They're not wrong either. Oh man. So Bohemian Rhapsody is directed by Bryan Singer. Bryan Singer has directed Public Access, The Usual Suspects, Apt Pupil, X-Men, X-Men 2, Superman Returns, Valkyrie, Jack the Giant Slayer, X-Men, Days of Future Past. I've already been through all of this on our review of X-Men Tequila Apocalypse. If you're unfamiliar with that episode, it was really great.
It's a classic in How Many Fingers lore.
We should have had Kevin back on for this. Yeah, Kevin would have also loved this movie. Yeah. I know that for a fact. He'll be back on soon. But writing credits of this movie go to Peter Morgan, who worked on the story and most notably wrote The Last King of Scotland, Frost Nixon, and the Queen. And the story and screenplay was written by Anthony McCartan, who wrote The Theory of Everything and Darkest Hour.
Very, very British.
Right, yeah. And so they came back to him for
writing here.
Yeah. Anyway, this film, I mean, there's a lot of background on this film. This film has been in development. In development. One of our
the short film by Mike King.
This film has been in development for I guess like 8-9 years now. I think there were like the first 3 years where the remaining members of Queen were like talking about having Sacha Baron Cohen cast for the lead as Freddie Mercury. And then there were like another 3 years where like the remaining members of Queen and Sacha Baron Cohen were like feuding, just because Sacha Baron Cohen quit the project because they had very different visions of what this movie should be. There was like
the members of Queen wanted it less focused on Mercury, and it seemed like they were trying to sanitize the image of Mercury as well. And Sacha Baron Cohen seems like he wanted to do a more gritty biopic of Freddie Mercury.
Oh, definitely. It was definitely a PG-13 family fun film versus the R-rated vision that Sacha Baron Cohen had. And obviously Freddie Mercury's life was like X-rated, I mean, yeah, and then there was probably another year or two where we found out about, I feel like within the lifetime of this podcast, where Rami Malek was cast of Mr. Robot fame. And and then we saw the first trailer. We really lived through it when we used to do like the live episodes or whatever. And the trailers aren't great.
No.
For this film. I can't say the movie is great either. But it's just, even to go beyond like the cringe kind of like the trailers and the history of this film, and like the producers just being ex-members of the band, which we'll get into like later because I don't know. The director of this film, Bryan Singer, there were problems on set. He gets fired near the end of when they're filming this because he just literally stops showing. He's like fucking Josh Trank on like the set of Fantastic Four, where like he's just not showing up on time. He's just not showing up at all near the end. And then we get Dexter Fletcher, who I
think was originally like in the Sacha Baron Cohen, if I'm not mistaken, was planned to be the director in the beginning.
He was?
If I'm not mistaken.
Oh, okay.
I remember reading that at some point. That he was on board to be the director, and then for some reason I guess maybe Bryan Singer having the bigger name is brought on board, and Dexter Fletcher is sort of like an assistant director or something like that at that point. And then when Bryan Singer stops showing up, he's, brought up to direct it. But then he doesn't even get an actual directing credit due to the DGA rules.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just kind of... I mean, even if you look at Bryan Singer's, I remember, weeks ago, or maybe weeks ago from when this movie came out, they were still, announcing titles that Bryan Singer would be, directing. And it's still, he's got all these things in the works, and he's kind of this Kevin Spacey kind of character, where it's, a well-known secret that he's with younger men below the legal age limit and having sex, and it's just a real fucking, why is he even still working in Hollywood? Yeah. And that even puts just a more it's already a cringy movie, and that just puts an even more sour kind of aftertaste on this whole movie.
Dexter Fletcher was selected as the film's director after Baron Cohen's departure.
Okay.
When they were considering Ben Whishaw, who is Q from the latest 007 iteration. And then he removed himself from the project early the following year amid reports of creative disagreements with King. I'm not sure which King they're talking about. With me? Graham King, who was the co-producer. So, yeah, a rocky production
most
for this
definitely.
movie, and all the way through to the end.
And I think he was just fucking arguing with everybody, most notably he was Rami Malek.
Yeah.
Which sucks, because if we want to jump right into this, I think this movie is terrible. But it's it's even sadder because Rami Malek is really trying, and I think he's a really talented actor, and we've seen that in Mr. Robot and everything. Again, I have my own hang-ups with Mr. Robot and everything, but I can
hardly fault Rami Malek for that, though. Yeah,
right. No, again, I think he's just talented
he's
actor.
really great in this season of BoJack as well. He plays the director of the TV series that they're making in BoJack.
I forgot about that.
But he's really good in that. I just wanted to bring up because I think it's the lens that I look at this whole movie through. It was an article that you had sent, or a headline to an article you had sent after I saw the movie, but it so perfectly encaptures it. It's an article on Pitchfork that said Bohemian Rhapsody is basically Queen's Wikipedia entry as a biopic. Let me pull it up just so I can see who actually wrote this article.
Oh, I have it right here. It's I have it in my notes somewhere. Oh, Kristen Yoon-soo Kim contributed the piece to Pitchfork, and I think it was through their op-ed section, which is called the Pitch. But yeah, again, I'd recommend checking out the entire article, but let me see, the beginning of the last paragraph really resonates kind of with that title, which is a really funny, or it just really resonates with everything that I think about the movie, and expands kind of on that funny title. It says, even without all the problems attached to the production, Bohemian Rhapsody is not so much a film as it is a dramatization of a Wikipedia entry, watered down and over-edited. Events in the film happen in trite succession without going anywhere interesting with the story's peaks and valleys. And I think that really nails it. Because I think you even came out of the movie and you were like, things just happen for no reason.
I'll get into it, but you sending that article helped me sort of crystallize why I couldn't stand this movie coming out of it. It just felt so meaningless, and it just felt like someone who was like, well, these are the things that happen, so let's just cover all that. It feels like a movie made by someone who's never actually seen a biopic before, much less a good biopic. Where if you think of some the greater biopics we've had, just to pick some from recent memory of Walk the Line or Ray, where you have these movies where the main character or the protagonist is dead, so we don't have him sort of sticking his fingers in this movie and trying to control how it's made, even if maybe his estate maybe has some play in it. And there are also these movies where like we're trying to see like the darker side of Johnny Cash or the darker side of Ray Charles, and trying to get to know them as a person, as a film character, rather than just as like what happened in Queen's career. And like that's what this movie ends up being, is just like, and then they recorded this album, and then they wrote this hit single, and then they did whatever, and they just they make everything feel so impersonal in this movie that that's why it feels like just a dramatization of a Wikipedia article. I almost feel, if you look at the entire movie through that lens, that was why I wanted to bring it up first. It makes so much sense because like you can literally like put the movie together chronologically, like through
like a series of paragraphs.
Like literally, like you have like the beginning of the movie is like early life, and it's like we open on Freddie and he's working at Heathrow Airport, and somebody calls him a Pakistani slur, and so like you can imagine like the Wikipedia sentence that's like Freddie Mercury like worked for a short time as a baggage handler at Heathrow Airport and found that he was subject to racial slurs or whatever. And they're like, all right, make a scene out of that. And then they show a scene with his family. And like it's literally like they show his family early on and then they never come back to them until like the end of the movie.
Very end,
which is why it feels like a Wikipedia article where it's like early life, like, you know, this was his family. His father was whatever profession. His mother was whatever profession. He had a sister, and he called himself Freddie, even though his name was Farouk. And they practiced the Zoroastrian religion, and like they fit all of that into this like disgusting expositionary like dialogue in that scene, where you can just literally like I could write the Wikipedia article on Freddie Mercury just by watching this movie and being like, yep, that's the second paragraph of the early life of like his father was this profession, his mother was this. And they practiced Zoroastrian. And did you know that Freddie was from Zanzibar? Like it's just like it almost seems like the script was written as like a Mad Lib of like, okay, like let's just insert all these details that we're pulling directly from like the Wikipedia article. And I think the thing that's sad about that is that they don't even get all the facts right. And we'll get into it later in this movie, but there's some facts that they straight up just like play with or intentionally get wrong. And I don't even know if it's necessarily for convenience sake. It's just weird, the facts that they play with in this movie. And I feel like it has to do with the fact that it's really a movie that is really and should be about Freddie Mercury, but everyone who's controlling it is not Freddie Mercury or Freddie Mercury's estate. It's all these people from the band who maybe had a somewhat limited view of what Freddie Mercury's early life was like.
Right, yeah. Oh my God. They just like... in every scene, there's just so many things happening. It's just kind of like, oh, I proposed to my girlfriend. Hey, Freddie, we just got signed by the band. It's just like they're just trying to fucking like, oh, and it's like Freddie's and her family and the whole band, and like then Freddie like gets a phone call while he's also singing, and then he's like, oh, I also legally changed my name to Freddie Mercury. And then again, they get like a phone call. He's like, hey fellas, we just got signed to like, a producer wants to meet with us or whatever. And it's just it's just fucking jamming whatever it can into every scene, and like nothing makes sense. And I don't know.
Yeah, and like if you look at
it's not
like
even movie magic. It's not, nothing about this is poetic in any sense. Yeah.
Just, so like if you go to like that first scene where Freddie goes out to the show by himself, like immediately before that they jam in like, this is what Freddie's dad does, this is what Freddie's mom does, this is what their names are, this is what his sister's name is, and he calls himself Freddie even though his name is Farouk, and they practice the Zoroastrian religion, and then the dad like vomits out that like cliche line of like good deeds, good words, good whatever or something. I don't know if that comes from the Zoroastrian thing. It just feels so uninspired in this
Freddie's
scene.
dad is right out of like Walk Hard, you know. It's just fucking like
the wrong kid.
It's just like he hates him for no real reason. It's just good.
Like they don't even necessarily have like, I wanted more of his parents. I don't know if this is just me not understanding his parents because the film doesn't really explain them very well, but I wanted more of his parents being like, you know, why are you messing around with this rock and roll music, this noise and whatnot? Like, if they really are this band that is like pushing the boundaries of what can be done with music at that time, then you would expect there would be some pushback from his parents. Like, again, I don't know what the movie gets right and what it doesn't, because it just plays so
but it's just a
weirdly
fucking...
loose with everything. Like, and then he goes out to that show, which, like, the dad isn't even, like, he just is, like, vomiting that line. Like, it's not even like, why are you going to that rock and roll show? Like, he's just like, oh, I'm going out. And he's like, hey, Freddie, good deeds, good words, good word. Like, it's just coming out with no meaning whatsoever. And then he's out at the show, and he's watching the band Queen, who is in their, like, previous iteration, which is the band Smile. And they had, like, another vocalist / bassist. And if you look at, like, the actual biography of Queen, the person who introduces Freddie to the band is that guy who leaves the band. He meets them at college because they all go to the same college, becomes friends with that guy, then becomes friends with the band, and then when that guy leaves to join Humpty Dumpty or Humpty, whatever the band is that he leaves for, Freddie sees the opening, and because he's like a close friend to them already at that point, they're like, well, yeah, obviously Freddie would be the next lead singer. But they create this like weird scene that like, it's not a better version of the story where like the vocalist bassist just quits without ever having met Freddie, and then Freddie just walks by and it's like, hey, you're the astrophysicist and you're the dentist, and I just have been stalking your guys' lives and know about you. Right. And then he just like does this weird sort of thing where, again, like he's this like shy, reserved guy, where like the real version of the story makes so much sense to me, where it's like you meet a friend and you know you're kind of like this outsider fan of the band, and too shy to really put yourself out there, and then an opportunity, you know, presents itself, and they're probably the ones to suggest, like, you know, Freddie, like, we've heard you sing, you got a pretty good voice, do you want to try out or whatever? But in this version that they create, he's like, oh, let me just like randomly just start singing for you guys after you've like insulted me. It's like it's exactly like you're saying, where they're trying to fit everything in there, where they're even trying to fit in like details about like his teeth, where he's like, that's not true, I've got 4, he does have 4 extra incisors. I know, but there's no way that is that proven that somebody leave a comment, like, if that's true, that like he just says like offhand, he's like, I kind of got more vocal range. Like, you know, it's just... No, I don't think he's ever been quoted as believing that's why he has a high vocal range. Yeah, And I read a whole article that was like trying to analyze that like weird line that gets like thrown in there of like, is that true? Does more space in your mouth create... Because I guess like it means he has more teeth at the back so that it pushes the top front teeth forward a whole lot. So really what it means is he's got this huge overbite. Essentially, and I don't know if that's true. I mean, either way, it's sort of okay, because it's like if the character believes that, then you know he can believe things that are not true about himself. I mean, but it just doesn't seem like it really fits. This whole, and again, it's a meet cute that never actually happened and isn't actually all that cute. Like we have like Roger like being an asshole and being like, not with those teeth, mate. Right? Which is like a real asshole thing to say. And I think he's only saying that it's not even in Roger's character. He's not an asshole in the rest of the movie. He just happens to like butt up against Freddie at times, and they just have him say that so that Freddie can have this sort of like retort that people like. I felt the people in my theater be like, yeah, fuck you, Roger, like he's got 4 extra incisors because he's got a better voice or whatever. Like it seemed like something that was a setup just to create this comeback that would make Freddie seem like a cooler guy. Right. And I don't know, this whole club scene, kind of the whole parent scene, the whole he meets his girlfriend in that scene too. God. Like he's just walking down the hallway and it's like, you. Well, no, it's fucking like some weird. It's shot like this. It looks like fucking like X-Men origin stories, where it's kind of like, oh man, my parents don't like me, and like the X-Men talent is, or the X-Men like extra gene or whatever is like kind of like this metaphor for teenage angst or whatever. And it's just kind of like he goes out to a club and everybody's like, man, who's that fucking freak with the fucking the teeth are ridiculous, the teeth are ludicrous. Freddie Mercury does not look like that. No, they are even more ridiculous in real life. They couldn't even get across that like he has just kind of fucked up looking teeth. Right, no, but it's there's something extra, there's something like he can't get over the fact that like he's walking. Freddie Mercury has always lived with those teeth, right? So it's just Freddie Mercury. Even if like you notice them when he opens his mouth and you're like, oh god, like that's a real overbite. Those are some real incisors. But he has. But Rami Malek, he plays it like someone who has an insert in his mouth. Like he can't get. He's always fucking like licking his teeth in this movie, and he can't get around them. He doesn't play it like someone who's used to it.
Freddie Mercury could also close his lips.
Yeah, and he did a lot.
Yeah, right. And like, but yeah, like Rami Malek kind of just lives with his mouth kind of like agape, and it's weird, and like people are staring at him all the time. And again, like it is like when he meets his girlfriend, kind of it is like this weird like the Bryan Singer like fucking X-Men origin story, and then like again when he has to like prove himself in front of the band, he's just kind of like extra room in my mouth to hit all those notes or whatever. He's like it feels like this weird X-Men thing. I don't know. That's just the whole vibe. It's the cinematography. It was weird. It was just yeah.
Like I think they tried to set up everything in this movie because there's so much in the Queen biography that they wanted to fit all of it in there. Excuse me. And they wanted everything to feel like easy and like serendipitous and like it was all like meant to be. Like they're just on this like magical ride and all this stuff keeps happening, but it just doesn't feel real. And especially when like when you actually take a look into like who Freddie Mercury was as a person, like he's this like shy, reserved guy who really doesn't like putting himself out there, but he has this sort of like extra personality when he's on stage. Right. And it doesn't make sense for him to just have this like random audition scene where he's like, I'm just gonna put myself out there and sing or whatever, and you guys are gonna
sing
love it.
Acapella.
Yeah, like and we're gonna know exactly when to come in like at the same time. Like I can get like they're all great singers. Everyone was a fantastic musician in Queen. I just wish they would have been like one of them comes in and then the other one comes in, like rather than without speaking, all three of them sing at the same time. But like he has that like serendipitous like audition scene, and that's how the entire movie is, where it's like just like things happen just because the movie needs them to happen. So it's like meet band, join band, see girlfriend, make my girlfriend, read ad, record album good, get signed. Like it's just like things just keep happening, and I don't feel like there's even any like actual drama in this movie, and that's what I want from a biopic. Like that's what I mean when I say like I feel like the people who made this movie have never seen or respected a good like biopic. Like as much as like we like to shit on biopics, there is like a formula to making them that like makes them pretty successful.
Right. Yeah. It was, I don't know. I think you could have made a really basic Queen biopic, and like it could have just been like, yeah, I don't know, this movie was by the numbers, but it was good, you know, kind of thing. But this is just all over the place. This is just a nightmare. It's just, I don't know.
There's literally like there's one line, I think it's the one you're talking about, where like they have the scene where he proposes to his girlfriend, you know, which is like whatever. Like I don't really need all that much about like Mary Austin. Like I know she was a big part of his life, but like it didn't necessarily need to be this like sort of made up romance thing that ends up getting turned on its head. But then like when the band like barges in where they're like, you haven't been picking up your phone calls or whatever, literally in like one line through like Roger, they expose that like the album has been released in the United States, it's charting, and they've booked a full US tour. Like there's nothing that feels real about any of the things that happen in this movie. Like even like when they do the whole like we're gonna record our first album, it's like, oh, like someone's working on a tire, and they just happen to have this like very unorganic conversation about like, oh, we need to like record an album, and then when they record an album, it's like, oh, we worked on it all night, and like they don't even like understand the writing process at all. Like they're working on it, and someone's like, we need to be more experimental.
It's it's just. You brought up so many points. I don't even know where to start. It's out of control. It's
I think I blame a lot of it on, I know Queen had script control, and I don't think it was Final Cut, but I think they called it like director rights or director control, where like I think they could basically veto any decision that the director was making with the movie. I don't think they explicitly had Final Cut.
Right.
But they essentially did, in terms of they were controlling the script, were probably making changes to the script and to decisions that Brian and eventually Dexter Fletcher were making with the movie.
Right.
And that can't bode well. Like,
no, and I mean,
like when you
I'm
make these
sure
movies,
that's why
you need
Sacha
to sort
Baron
of
Cohen left. Yeah.
you need to detach yourself from who you're making it about.
Right. I'm sure.
know?
Yeah.
You get whatever resources from them, like Queen, like give us some interviews to help write the script and give us some early footage and photos that other people might not have access to. But then let's keep you at an arm's distance from then on.
Right. Because later it kind of turns into like the rest of the band is always in the right place and they always have the right things to say. Even though they feud with Freddie Mercury, it's kind of like, God, Freddie's throwing this party and he's being flamboyant and it's getting out of control, kind of. It's kind of like, oh, and Freddie was always late and we were always right, kind of. It's just kind of like when you're making a movie about the producer, kind of, and it's just stupid. It's, I don't know.
Yeah,
and it's
I
just,
don't know. Again, it's one of those things where like they couldn't have made it without them giving their permission and whatnot.
Oh, and Freddie came back and
the point is, don't make the
knees.
movie. But I mean, again, we have this argument on this podcast all the time. The movie fucking killed at its opening. It beat projections. Like the projections were like, I want to say like 45 to like 50, and it opened closer to like 55 to 60.
Right.
For the opening weekend. And I think that's going to continue. I was also reading an article that was going over the trend of like audiences just really not giving a fuck about critics' reviews this year. You have like movies like Venom that are getting torn apart, and this, and there's a few others they were listing, but they just had monster openings. Like, nobody cares.
People want to hear Queen through the speakers of a movie theater system, Yeah. I don't know. I mean, like, I was in my theater and I had people like sing along to the fucking songs and they didn't fucking care about any of the plot points.
Yeah.
Even though I think I did say, like, by the end, like, they were like, oh man, is that really it? Like, kind of like when the movie like ends right after Live 8, they were just kind of like, oh, like there was no like emotional closure or anything. Like, it was just.
It's sad because like I kind of get it because like when the movie was over, I like went home and I like added a bunch of like Queen songs that I had forgotten about to my like Spotify library. Like it does help you sort of just by virtue of playing some of the songs that maybe don't get as much radio play. Like I feel like I don't hear like Radio Gaga on like the radio as much, ironically. Or like the other song they play at Live Aid, the Hammer to Fall. Like there's songs like I've heard before, but they're not like the main rotation of like Killer Queen, Bohemian Rhapsody, Somebody to Love, Bicycle. What's the one that is in all the trailers last year? The Don't Stop Me Now, or whatever.
The Hardcore Henry.
Yeah, Hardcore Henry one.
Yeah. I even love the. I was like, I don't know where we're going with this, and I already had like a hesitancy with this film, but by the time we like finished the film, I was like, I kind of like that like opening scene of him walking towards the Live 8 stage. When we get to the actual scene, I
completely forgot that's how it opened. I thought it opened on Heathrow, but no, you're right.
No, it's it opens with that, and it's playing Somebody to Love, I think. And it's cool because it's kind of like you can't tell who it is, in quotes. But obviously it's Freddie Mercury or whatever. And he's kind of like pumping himself up before he goes on stage. And it looks like there's like nobody behind him, kind of. And I don't know. He's got all of the, again, I think Rami Malek really did the research. And he walks and he like expresses this kind of exuberance that Freddie Mercury had. And it looks great, but then they replay the scene before they get on to...
Sorry, I was looking up a video to find someone's name.
Oh, no, it's fine. But then they revisit this scene, and he's doing the same thing, but the band is walking behind him, and it's just... It doesn't fit. It's just like a weird kind of...
You don't like the second version of it with the band?
Yeah, it's obviously different.
Yeah.
It's just
a different take, the
shot behind. Yeah, he's coming from like a different location. It was just weird. I was just kind of like, okay. Like I'd be more okay with him at the end going on by himself again.
The point I wanted to bring up that I was looking up the YouTube video for is because there's this guy, Mark Martell, who does just exclusively Queen covers,
Right.
because he's got an incredible voice that has sort of the range of Freddie Mercury for the most part. He's really fantastic, and I think he's uncredited in the film, but just from watching his videos and reading things that he said, he's got like a whole album of Queen covers coming out that's coinciding with the release of this movie, and hearing the voices that replicate Freddie Mercury in this movie, I think he's the guy who does the voices.
A lot of
the
people have
singing
speculated that, yeah.
But he's not credited in the movie for it, or if he is, it's like deep in the credits, like you have to like really pick him out, which I think sort of takes a little bit away from Rami Malek's performance in this, which
Definitely, yeah.
grain of salt, because like Freddie Mercury has one of the most incredible voices that we've ever seen.
Also unique.
A unique,
Right.
incredible range that few people have ever been able to replicate. That's why this Mark Martel guy is so successful, because he does sort of have like a similar overbite and
Right.
can just like really belt some of the parts that
Can
Freddie
reach those extra notes.
He's got more room in his mouth.
Actually, I got more room in my mouth.
I think he's actually, Mark Martel himself is American. But like it makes me think of like you look at like Jamie Foxx and Ray, and like part of his performance that's so great there is that like like he's playing the piano and like actually like belting out some of these like Ray Charles parts, and same thing with like Joaquin Phoenix playing Johnny Cash in Walk the Line. Like part of the interesting aspect of that role is that he's actually doing the musicality of it as well. And I mean, those are admittedly easier people to handle, doing an impression of musically than Freddie Mercury. But I do think it takes a little bit away from Rami Malek's performance. But again, I have to throw a grain of salt in there, because like, I don't know if I know anyone else who could do the acting and also do the voices of it as well. And I think more of it is just me being upset that they're not promoting Mark Martel as doing the voice for that. Like, I know that's a hard thing to get across, because you want to be like, oh, Rami Malek, whatever. But I think it's sort of disingenuous to be like putting everything out there in this Oscar push for Rami Malek and make it seem like he's doing the vocals when he's clearly not.
Right. Yeah.
Like, it's very evident that he's lip syncing a lot of this.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much of that is just my bias going into this after having watched these Mark Martel videos and being like, knowing that he was going to be the one doing the Queen vocals. Like, I think he's even like been sort of forbidden from talking about it leading up to the movie. Like, I think, he's been doing all this Queen stuff. But now he just kind of releases covers and is like, hey, check out Bohemian Rhapsody for no reason whatsoever.
Right. Yeah.
Other than it's a Queen thing. But it's clearly him in the movie.
Yeah. I mean, even Rami Malek's he's kind of really good at lip syncing, kind of. Even if he's not really good, he's better than the other Queen members. They really give it away. They're fucking terrible at like lip syncing and like the equivalent of like playing their instruments. They're pretty awful. I'm surprised they couldn't get like better takes in this movie.
I did think I thought John Deacon was good, who's Joseph Mazzello, who is Tim from Jurassic Park. The little kid. I thought he was good as John Deacon, just because like I, out of curiosity, went and watched the whole Live 8 footage after, and like he does sort of nail that like goofiness of his performance, where he's kind of like doom 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 doom, and like, just stepping around and whatnot, having a good time.
There's so many like dumb, like this movie almost feels like a part of a franchise.
The Queen universe.
It almost feels it feels like, I think you said something like it feels like Solo, but like for me it might be like a different reason, where it's kind of like Solo was filled with like remember, but like during their first, like this is just the first of many. If there was like one or two, I'd be like, okay, whatever. But when they're first performing, or Rami Malek's first time with them performing, he's like struggling with the mic. And then he removes...
No, you're on the same page. That's why I thought it was like solo. It was a lot of like inside jokes of like, why does Freddie Mercury walk around with like the top half of a mic stand when he performs?
Because the first time he performed, he didn't like the mic stand. And ever since then, he's just been It's
something that like, it may even, honest to God, be true.
I doubt it, but yeah.
But... we don't need to see it. It's not important. Like, it was fine when it was just part of his stage presence.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, like I said, like it's a Wikipedia article where like events just happen and there's not even like really any dialogue between the members as people outside of the context of songwriting. And the songwriting in this movie is so bad. Like, if you're following our How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up Facebook group, I had shared a like clip that they were pushing out as promotional material where I don't know why they chose this clip to put out there, because it seems like a scene out of like a sitcom, the way the audio is edited. Like, so much of this movie sounds like really bad ADR, which like I guess you can sort of, I don't know, forgive, but understand if like Bryan Singer gets cut out of this movie by the end of production and Dexter Fletcher is just kind of like, this movie's fucked. It's not my baby. I'm not even getting credit for it. I'm just going to rush through the ADR of all this shit and get it done.
It ends up kind of sounding and looking like The Room almost. Like, it's so bizarre.
So like in that scene where like they're trying to explain how they write We Will Rock You, and it's like, fucking, like, I didn't need an explanation for how they came up with stomp, stomp, clap. And like in that scene, you have like Freddie like walking up to Brian and Roger and John and being like, what's going on? What's going on over here?
What's going on here?
He's got like his hands on his hips and his like face is away from the camera, so the ADR is just even worse in that scene. And then like even before that, like you have them like, you have like the four of the greatest fucking musicians in the world. Like that's one of the things about Queen, is that they're a fucking prog rock band. So they're just like, they're trying to like break the mold of everything they do. It's literally, it's progressive is in the genre that they play. But to do this, like one of their simplest, stupidest songs, like I don't know how many people like actually like We Will Rock You as like a
like outside of a hockey stadium.
Yeah, like it was. It's great, but I don't know if I needed a scene about it in the movie, and I definitely didn't need to see like some of the greatest guitarists and musicians being like, okay, boom, boom, clap. Not even boom, boom. Okay, and then on the third beat, you had the clap, as if he couldn't explain boom, boom, like something that the audience is gonna get right away. By the design of the song, he had to explain like beat by beat to two of the other greatest musicians in the world at the time. Like, it's fucking ridiculous, and it's honestly insulting to Queen as a band. And it's clearly a script written by people who have never fucking written music themselves before.
And it's also just, it's kind of like piling on the idea, or just, God, the practice of like shoving so many things in one scene. It's just kind of, Freddie Mercury he's fired their agent and he showed up late and they're all arguing, and meanwhile like John Deacon is in the corner and he just writes the bass line to Another One Bites the Dust, and it was just
Under Pressure,
which would have probably been a better song to do, because we would have seen, like, if they like casted somebody to look like David Bowie or something, and like seen like what that writing process looked like. I'm surprised they didn't do that. You could have capitalized on David Bowie's death.
They had that song in there, but they didn't have the songwriting of Under Pressure.
But it's so stupid. It's like, you know, it's just kind of, I fired our agent. You're late, Freddie. Dun, 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 or it's just like,
he's got the iconic bass line of the song like fully fleshed out at that point. You know, like, which is not how songwriting works. Like, he's even just like, oh, it's just kind of like throwing it together or whatever.
Maybe the most cringy scene in this movie is when Freddie Mercury's laying in bed and there's a piano above him and he reaches over and then he perfectly plays the piano.
They're trying to play like musical Spider-Man. Like, he's playing the piano upside down.
And he perfectly plays Bohemian Rhapsody. And it was just kind of like, and he's like,
It's got potential.
Methinks it might be a song one day. You know, it's just like fucking stupid.
There's a lot of that in this movie. It just feels like inside jokes for like mega Queen fans, and that's
not even mega Queen fans. I think it's like casual Queen fans.
Yeah, but I mean, I think there's some stuff that's more of like a deep cut. Like I feel like they have like the dialogue where they're at like the ranch thing that they're recording A Night at the Opera at, and they're arguing about like what is the song, like I Love My Car or In Love With My Car or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
That feels like an inside joke for like people who like really like study Queen, and like maybe not like study Queen, but just people who are more familiar with Queen than just their radio singles, you know, like it seems like an inside joke of like, oh yeah, like that the lyrics to In Love With My Car are kind of weird and whatnot, you know, like, and it's like they waste time on like that shit rather than like who are John Deacon and Roger Taylor and Brian May like as people, because we get no characteristics for any of them outside of like maybe like Roger Taylor's a little bit of a womanizer, but they're like hardly even willing to go that far, and whenever they express it, it's through Freddie being an asshole by saying it.
Right. Yeah. No.
Like I know nothing about Brian May, who is like arguably like the bigger mind behind Queen. Like, I know really nothing about like John Deacon. Like they're not willing to like spend the time in this movie in a way that's like actually useful.
And then also fucking, I mean, to expand upon, they kind of try to make it this like the starting with that piano upside down Spider-Man style. They kind of try to make like Bohemian Rhapsody this motif.
It's the title of the film, Joe.
Which is, oh god, yeah. I mean, when our
what do we call the movie? The band's biggest hit.
Yeah.
Cut, print, ready to go.
It's also like kind of. I'm not gonna pretend like I know a lot about Queen or whatever, and when they were coming up, but like from what I know, I feel like Bohemian Rhapsody was actually one of their more obscure kind of singles. I don't know. It's just strange. It's also strange.
From what I read, I think the like getting Bohemian Rhapsody on the radio is accurate, where it was something that their record label didn't want them to put. It was like an unauthorized single, but Freddie Mercury did like go and like schmooze Kenny Everett, I think the radio DJ's name is, and sort of get them to play it on the radio, and then people just kept calling in. I think they said they played it on the radio like 24 or 36 times the first day, just because people kept calling in and being like, play that Queen song again. Right. So I do think that part is accurate. But I feel like the scene before that with like Mike Myers as the radio executive thing, it's like they play him like this cartoon villain. There's a scene in the trailer that gets cut out, and like thank God, but also I can't like not remember this scene from the trailer. It was clearly a part of the vision for this movie at one point, where he literally says like, "You'll never hear Queen on the radio." Like again, like even that feels like an inside joke of like, oh, like how stupid was he? Like he didn't know that Bohemian Rhapsody would be the most like played song in the radio. They even have a scene where they reference fucking A Night at the Roxbury,
Wayne's World. Where he's like, people will never bang their heads to this song in a car, and like, which is the whole reason they.
Why did I make the Night of the Roxbury connection? Do they sing that in that movie?
No,
they just bang their heads in a car.
Yeah. Well, it's also like an SNL thing too. I was just I fucking like really lost my mind at that part, because it was just Mike Myers, who's in Wayne's World, saying
a Wayne's World reference.
Yeah. It was fucking crazy. It was just, I don't know. And he plays like this kind of, it was weird for them to bring up that he was like he was part of the record label that did like Dark Side of the Moon, which again is not a radio friendly album at all. I was just kind of like, that doesn't help this scene. I don't know. Yeah, but he is this cartoonishly villain.
It's sort of similar to a point that we'll sort of belabor in an episode 2 weeks from now, the First Man episode, where I almost feel like you can't really make a movie about Queen because there's not as much struggle as you want there to be, and it's just not inherently a dramatic story, you know? Like, they were friends for most of their life. There wasn't a lot of drama in the band. Freddie leaves and they're kind of like pissed at him, but they forgive him pretty easily. And
it's also
like Bohemian Rhapsody is this like really incredible like benchmark of like songwriting, and like, you know, at a time where like we wanted everything to be like sanitized and radio friendly, and they put out this 6-minute song where like it's breaking records for like the amount of tracks that they're using to put this crazy song together, and it's like changing genres within a song. Like, all that's true, but I don't know that it's necessarily as hard of a journey as they were making out to be. You know, like literally, like they play it on the radio, you know, according to the true story, and people just can't stop calling in and being like the song's just an undeniable classic. I have a hard time believing that like the radio guy that they're fighting with is like, you fucking idiots, it'll never be on the radio, rather than like, I don't know, maybe it's not the best money choice, and it's a great song, I'll give you guys that, but I don't know, I have to lean towards In Love With My Car or You'll Be My Best Friend or whatever, right? You know, like, because they paint it so black and white when it was probably pretty gray.
I've seen a lot of like people who like kind of like Queen historians who are like, is it really everybody versus that one guy? Mm-hmm. Or are there other people kind of trying to convince, like other people even in the band trying to convince like Freddie Mercury, like to be like, hey man, like, I know you're like undyingly want this song to be the first single, but maybe let's start with something else and work our way towards this kind of, you know, instead of like this one guy who's just like, you'll never fucking hear this on the radio or whatever. And it's just, I don't know, it's just so strange. And then they throw a fucking brick through his window, and it's just like, Jesus, it's like this guy's doing his job. Yeah, this guy is being like, hey, like,
and again, that's the members of Queen actually sanitizing the script and being like, oh, we were on board with Bohemian Rhapsody from the beginning, and it was just that one douche radio guy who didn't want to play it.
You're right, the guy in your record label who's like, hey, listen, we're all in business together, and I think this is, if we put our best foot forward, we can sell a lot of things, and we can all make this better for all of us or whatever. Instead, he's like, your fucking song will never be heard on the fucking radio. It's like, this guy's on your team. Like, it's a strange scene. I don't know.
It's also it's interesting that like when this trailer came out, like everyone was like ripping the trailer for being like they're like straight washing Freddie's life, like they're not gonna like acknowledge that he was like not openly, because he was closeted, but that his bisexuality was obviously a huge part of his life, and they're gonna hide his like drug use, and it's just gonna be like a Queen biopic rather than like a more focused on Freddie Mercury biopic. And it's funny that like none of that actually turns out to be true in the movie, but the movie just finds its own way to fucking suck. Like they address the bisexuality like fucking head on. Like they explicitly use the word bisexual so many times in this movie, and they're maybe not as explicit with the drug use, which is fine. They don't skirt away from it. They just don't show him like putting needles in his arm, and like I'm fine with that. That's not necessarily.
Well, I think there's just scattered cocaine on a table at one point.
Yeah, and he's throwing like cocaine bags to people at like a party, like, you know, trying to express that. But there are some weird things that are a little troubling, like when he comes out to Mary as bisexual in the movie, she's just kind of like, "No, you're gay." And it's kind of like they went like the opposite way of like, rather than straight washing, they went through like bi erasure and just were like, no, he was gay. When like in reality, after he breaks up with Mary, he dates and has sex with like multiple women and men. Like,
that scene is also so weird because she's like, oh God, men always leave me, and like, it's gay, so it's not even your fault. And it's just kind of like, you're actually a good guy, and I love you, but I'm so hurt too. It's not your fault, you're gay. Like, it's such a weird scene.
I mean, that's a weird scene to try to get across, because I mean, there is understandably like, yeah, she's going to be hurt when her husband-to-be is essentially forcing her to break up with him by being whatever. But yeah, I don't like. There's some other stuff that they do actually sanitize, like his relationship with Jim Hutton. Like in this movie, again, I don't even know if like sanitize is the right word, because they also like pervert it in weird ways. Like there's parts of this movie that like feel like Bryan Singer was like, yeah, like Freddie Mercury was just like grabbing ass and it was really cool, when it's like a weird time to have that sort of like non-consensual aggressive sexual nature in a movie. Like when he meets Jim Hutton, he just like smacks his ass as he's walking by, and he's the help at one of his parties, and Jim Hutton is like, you know, calling him out on it, and Freddie Mercury's like, oh no, I didn't mean anything, but whatever.
It's just my eccentric personality.
And then they sort of like ease into this like romantic relationship where like in reality, supposedly Freddie Mercury met Jim Hutton out at like a gay club, and he like walked up to Jim Hutton and was like, do you have a big cock? You know, it's like stuff like that. That's like, that would have been more interesting to see in a movie, and I wouldn't have had to been like reminded of Bryan Singer's like gross sexual like nature. Like that takes me out of the movie when like Freddie Mercury is doing like sexually aggressive stuff without consent, and I'm like, oh yeah, the director of this movie was fired for other reasons, but has also been at the height of like a lot of sexual assault scandals.
Right, yeah.
They do, like we said, the drug use is kind of, it's in the background, and I'm fine with that. They didn't like deny that drugs were involved. I maybe didn't need them to try to pretend that it was mostly alcohol rather than like you know, heroin and cocaine and stuff like that.
It was also weird. I don't know. It was just kind of like, I think Sacha Baron Cohen kind of had this exit that wasn't, you know, again, there was 3 years of like where he and the remaining members of Queen were just kind of throwing shots at each other. And I just remember one of like the things was like Sacha Baron Cohen was like, you know, like he had done his research. He kind of had a version of a script that he wanted to work on, and he was just kind of like, you know, like he would have these parties where he'd have like midgets or small people or whatever like walk around with plates on their head just full of like cocaine or whatever. And this movie like has a weird response to like, I feel like they were like, oh well, we don't want to, you know, like we want this to be like some like weird dad rock anthem where people come in and are fans of Queen and just want to see, but we also like, we don't want to look like we're kind of like whitewashing.
There's parts of this movie that feel like there were responses to the trailer.
No, exactly. And it was kind of just like, and then there's a scene where Rami Malek is like, shake the freak tree and see who like falls. I want little people there at my party. And it was just kind of like, okay. Yeah. It was just weird. It was
and they did
like
have
a preemptive
without
kind of
cocaine hats, but
right. Yeah. It was just this weird preemptive kind of like, oh, we can still do like drug-fueled Freddie Mercury, but without you, Sacha Baron Cohen, without your like gritty R-rated version of this. It was weird.
They kind of like they were willing to go to some places but not others. Like a big part of Freddie Mercury's life was during his relationship with Paul, like having these like big orgies that they would like sort of organize, and they sort of hint at it where like the one scene, like the first time that he's really with Paul, and they go back to his hotel with whatever guy, but it's while he's still with Mary Austin. Right. Like again, it's another example. Like there's a lot of stuff in this movie where like they do approach it, but they end up almost like guilting Freddie Mercury for it rather than trying to understand him. Like they approach the AIDS head on, like he says, you know, explicitly, like I've got AIDS, and they even try to offer an explanation of why because that's a criticism of Freddie Mercury, is that he didn't sort of put it out in the public. He kept his AIDS closeted. when people did sort of need someone to look up to and respect during this time of crisis. And in the movie, he's kind of like, I don't want to be their poster boy. Like, I just want to, create music with the time that I have left. But a lot of the stuff they do around that seems like they're almost sort of guilting him for his lifestyle rather than looking at his lifestyle as a like consequence of his like loneliness, like the underlying condition of why he's doing all this stuff. Because I mean, from what I've read about Freddie Mercury, that is sort of the deal where like he was this shy, reserved person who always felt like an outcast, and he had this sort of second personality that came alive when he was on stage, and that was what people were drawn to. But they were also drawn to him sort of being this like underdog socially who like was quiet at parties, and he would like keep his hand over his mouth because he was so ashamed of his teeth not being like, I've got 4 extra incisors and that's why I can sing
more vocal
range. And like this movie, like it just doesn't, it's afraid or just doesn't know how to say anything important about anything important. Like there's such an opportunity to talk about loneliness through Freddie Mercury, where he's almost like he's like a modern day like Great Gatsby who like is just like reaching out for a connection, and he's got like these crazy vast resources, and he's throwing these extravagant parties to surround himself with people, but then they all leave and he just feels lonely at the end of it, and he doesn't have what he really wants. And he's like having orgies and using drugs and going to all these clubs and parties and stuff like that, and he still feels like an outcast at the end of it. And I feel like the movie didn't fully capture that. Like it sort of touches on it in their weird version of the Jim Hutton meet cute, where Jim Hutton's sort of like analyzing Freddie, but they don't really touch it anywhere else in the movie. Like they just kind of show him being like extravagant and rambunctious everywhere else, rather than being like the shy, reserved guy that Freddie Mercury actually was, who was sort of throwing these parties as like a show and an excuse to surround himself with people to try and feel less lonely. And again, like they do have the scenes where he keeps calling Mary when he's feeling lonely, and like that's sort of touching on those themes, but not really as much as I really wanted to. And like I feel like if you really nail that theme of like he feels lonely, he's surrounding himself with people to try to fill that void. And then if like you really bring that home through like the way that he separates with Queen, so like he's not playing live, so he doesn't have that like outgoing side of his personality on display anymore, and he's just being the shy, reserved guy who's trying to do whatever, and he's not playing live. Then when we actually like ramp up to this like Live Aid performance, then it makes so much more sense why that would be the climax of this movie. Because in reality, like it's just kind of like a recreation of like a like YouTube video that like your dad shows you when he's drunk and he's like, music used to be better. Like I don't really get in this movie why Live Aid, that performance was as big as it was,
right? Yeah,
because like they don't really express that like, oh, it's been that long since Queen has played. They don't express that it's been that long since Freddie Mercury has played. There's a lot of stuff that's important to like the Live Aid story that's not really expressed in the movie, because they just kind of recreate literally like shot by shot that performance.
And it feels like, again, it's such an iconic performance, but it's just like I don't know, it's recreated for no real reason within the movie. And I thought the fucking like CGI rendering of the crowd was so bad.
I saw some reviews that were talking about like praising the recreation of Wembley Stadium, but it was like,
What was it? It was also like they had like the crowds of people. You could see like 2 dudes with like the same t-shirt who were like mimicking each other. Like kind of, it's just like somebody's like copying and pasting over and over and over again. And then they would just kind of like zoom in with reaction shots of like the same people over and over and over and over again. Kind of like there's like one old dude in the crowd who they just kept zooming into. It was just kind of like, we are the champions, and yeah, we will rock you. And it was just kind of like, oh no, is this just a fucking stadium of 8 people that you copy and pasted everywhere? Yeah.
And they do, like, I don't think they do the full performance because they cut some of the songs.
They don't have We Will Rock You, yeah.
And they cut some of the songs down to like a verse and a chorus, but they, for the most part, get most of
the last 30 minutes of this movie is this performance.
It goes on unnecessarily long. And they try to like ramp it up in other ways where they're like, they have the whole thing of like Bob Geldorf, who's like organizing the Live Aid concert.
Right.
And they show like the sort of like control room where like, you know, during like the other performances, like, you know, there's not a whole lot of donations coming in, and he's like, we need more donations. And then like the Queen thing goes on, and it's like, oh, the phones are ringing off the hooks, or like, the donations like won't stop coming in. It's like in 2018, do we really care about a fundraiser that happened in 1985 for like famine in Africa, which like has now been proven to be like this weird thing where like the more money you send to Africa, the more that Africa gets abused by like the weird power structure that's been put in place by imperialism and colonialism and all that. That's a weird tangent. But like, I feel like they could have focused more on like, what did this performance and performing and connecting with the crowd again mean to Freddie Mercury? And rather than like trying to recreate beat by beat the actual movements that Freddie Mercury, the person, took during Live Aid, you know, they could have separated from that a little bit and like just give us like a reaction shot of like, you know, Freddie Mercury doing like the ayo, and just give us a fucking smile on his face and like a slow motion shot, and where he's just kind of like, yeah, like this is what I was missing. I'm not lonely. I'm not alone. I have this whole world of millions of people that connect with me through Queen that I can access anytime I want to, you know? Because they also go through like such an effort of like trying to like express like the theme of Queen, where like when they're in like the meeting with the one agent and Freddie Mercury is like, we're a band for the outcasts and whatnot, and it's a little cringy then, but like if they nail it during like the Live Aid scene, then that makes a little bit more sense then. And like they try to like hammer it home with like Mary Austin like crying and all these other people crying, and I'm like, I don't know, I don't really get it from that point, because it's like, did these people really understand how lonely Freddie Mercury was and how much this performance meant to him for his loneliness? Like, I don't know, it almost seems like those people crying are like the like personification of like our dads watching this YouTube video and being like, it's such a great performance. Like it is, but like, what does it mean like outside of just being a great live performance? Because like the crowd didn't know about Freddie's AIDS at that point. It was something he'd only told, you know, the band.
I don't think the band knew it either. Well, I think the timeline's out of order.
Oh, is that a fake fact in the movie?
Right, yeah. I was listening to something about it where it was just kind of like, even towards the band, it was just implied years later. They had no idea. I don't even think he really knew during the Live Aid performance. But I think it was just a convenient emotional point in the movie to do something like that.
I can sort of understand that, like, maybe they were let's do a biopic that's not, you know, from the beginning to the end, and then we'll end on Freddie's death and some big in memoriam concert or something like that. I can sort of understand and respect that decision, but I feel like they didn't do their homework in helping us understand, like, why it is Live Aid. Live 8 was the one that Linkin Park was a part of. The what? Linkin Park and like U2 and a bunch of other bands.
I was at Live Aid.
Were you really?
Yeah.
In Philly?
In Philly, yeah, because they did all the original places that they did in the first one. I saw, my dad took me, bless his soul, still alive. But we saw Jay-Z and Linkin Park did the entirety of Collision Course. And that was helping the people in Africa.
I bet the phones were ringing off the hook during the performance. We can't keep up with all the donations, sir! My God, Queen saved Africa. Oh, God. All right, you ready to get into some ratings for this movie?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. On review aggregator Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds an approval rating of 61% based on 276 reviews and an average rating of 6.1 out of 10. The website's critical consensus reads, Bohemian Rhapsody hits a handful of high notes, but as an in-depth look at a beloved band, it offers more of a medley than a true greatest hits collection. Nicely done, Rotten Tomatoes. And we do have some Facebook group comments. Let me pull those up. Of course, you can join our Facebook group just by searching How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up, the Facebook group on Facebook. We do movie discussions, movie news, movie trailers, movie memes, just anything movie related. It's more for movie lovers than for fans of the podcast. But you do have an opportunity to get your voice heard on the podcast if you want to comment on our posts seeking opinions of the movies we review. Riley Slate, who also had the synonym for this episode, said, This film reignited my love of Queen's music. However, the story of how the band got together and became famous seemed ultra-sanitized, and as someone who wasn't alive during the era of Queen's popularity, I wonder how accurate the film actually is. My guess is they left a lot out. And then Tammy Hawkins said, Loved it. I felt I was really watching Mercury. I think he captures Mercury in the non-singing aspect.
Well, yeah, it's, I don't know. Yeah, to revisit what I was saying near the beginning is like, I think, and I mean, we see on websites like Gold Derby, like prediction websites, I think people kind of thought this was going to be Rami Malek's breakout role, where he was going to be Freddie Mercury and perhaps even grab an Oscar nomination or even win, because like music biopics like Walk the Line and Ray, have
a history.
Yeah, they get Oscar wins. But yeah, again, unfortunately, both of those were R-rated. This was just kind of a dad rock sing-along at the theaters. And, and I think it looks like Rami Malek thinks it's not the latter, like he really nails down what, again, to a fault, kind of nails like what Freddie Mercury was doing at the Live Aid concert. Like he's memorized every move, he's memorized the way that he walks, and he's really nailed down all of this, even though he looks like a caricature of Freddie Mercury with his fucking teeth and makeup.
He's also a very short person.
Oh,
and like,
yes.
I mean, Freddie Mercury is like shorter than some of the
6'4",
other
though. Yeah.
The other band members, I guess, are pretty tall, especially Brian May. But Rami Malek is like 5'5" or something like that.
Right? Yeah.
Like comically short in comparison to the other ones. All right, so not sure how I want to land numerically with
I'll go
this
first,
movie.
then.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah. This I just some like extra notes. I felt like this was kind of like Queen's greatest hits by the way of biopic. Again, which is problematic and has a lot to do with why this film is bad. But there's also a whole array of why this film was pretty bad. It's pretty paint by the numbers. At the end, the Live Aid it was cool on its own, just because of how great of a recreation of such an iconic moment it was, but like it could have also just been a Disney ride, like it was just like cool, and like if you had like
going,
even if you had like a screen and like surround sound, and it was just kind of like, oh, Rami Malek is playing Freddie Mercury, and they had like surround sound, and it was kind of like, oh, what if you wanted to be at Live Aid, and it was just kind of like, oh, what a cool Disney ride. You could just have that as an experience, I don't know. It made me a little concerned when this did well. I'm not looking for the Dad Rock universe, cinematic universe.
They're gonna get all the bands.
I don't know where this is going to lead. They're like, God, we had a fucking pedophile direct this.
and it still made $60 million.
Fucking pedophile direct this, and it was like
fired.
He got fired. There was another director. The movie was awful, and it still made a ton of money.
Oh, there's going to be a movie about The Who, Pink Floyd,
like Led Zeppelin. It was
just, they already made the Beatles movie, and it didn't do well.
You're right. Yeah, I'm sure they'll try again. Yeah, no, that's what I mean when I say dad cinematic universe, a dad rock cinematic universe. And also, I think besides, for different reasons, the mic stand was one of the most cringiest parts of this movie. And the Spider-Man Bohemian Rhapsody, but dealing with Freddie Mercury's sexuality, I think one of the most cringiest scenes is when he's on the phone at a truck stop with his wife, and then like NBC 1985 like trucker kind of like walks by him, and Rami Malek's like, I gotta go, I gotta have sex with a trucker at a truck stop. Like, it was just the most. I mean,
it's another example of them trying to do like two things at once to try to fit everything into this movie.
Yeah, it was just the most cliche version of like, oh, gay people are fucking, they're unhinged, can't wait to have sex with people. People look at them at the bus stop or the truck stop, and they just can't wait to have sex with a trucker.
Yeah,
who's like a clean-cut, handsome trucker, man. Like, it was just
not to derail, but just like a quick tangent. Like, I feel like they didn't do a good job of explaining like the like homosexual landscape at the time. Where like I was reading that like just 7 years earlier, like sodomy was like illegal, or homosexuality was considered sodomy. 7 years earlier in England, like that's where you have like movies like The Imitation Game, where one of our greatest minds, Alan Turing, is arrested for just being gay.
Right.
And like that's something that like would have helped us understand Freddie Mercury a lot better and be like, yeah, maybe that's why he didn't want to be this like gay icon, because he grew up in a time where it was literally illegal. And he went to jail for it.
Yeah. Where that just seems like, again, like this kind of preemptive kind of like, see, we're gay, like, see, we got midgets at his party. Like, it's just weird kind of preemptive, like,
they're covering all their bases,
right? Yeah,
in the Dad Rock sing along,
right? Where he does,
they probably cut out like the making of like Killer Queen or something,
right? Yeah,
in order to fit that in.
Where it does,
where Freddie's like, what if we had a song that was like Killer Queen?
Where it does, I mean, like, there is something in this movie, just like even the most minor kind of reminder that the AIDS crisis was a thing that makes me like a little emotional, kind of. Nothing about any of these characters makes me emotional at all, but just the state of what was happening in the AIDS crisis and everything. I don't know. It made me, I was just like, I wish this was Philadelphia, or I wish there was like some sort of like actual Freddie Mercury, or like Keith Haring, or like really anybody who died of like the AIDS crisis. I don't know. It was just kind of like, man, this could have been something.
Yeah.
Which obviously, I think Sacha Baron Cohen had a similar sentiment. Anyway, I think I'm going to give this 1.5 fingers. It's not a great film.
No, it is not.
But I think the only thing that keeps it afloat is Rami Malek's performance / commitment to a bad movie, and like just the Queen songs themselves, just because they're great songs. I don't know. Yeah, and that's where I'm gonna leave off. Pass it to you.
I had a tangent that I wanted to go on, and I think I totally lost it.
AIDS crisis.
It was somehow related to that.
Okay.
it was something that this movie did horribly that I wanted to just
It's a lot of those.
get one more rant in there. I mean, pick a scene in this movie and there's something I can say about how awful it was.
Right.
I don't have a whole lot more to pile on this movie. I mean, as you can tell, I really didn't enjoy it. I think it's almost laughable how, like, I think just inherent to the biopic formula, it's really hard to make a bad biopic. Like, and they somehow managed to do that. You know, part of like what makes like Ray and Walk the Line so interesting is like hearing these like movie versions of these songs, and like this didn't really do that. Like it felt like they just took a lot of like the actual recordings and just put Mark Martell's voice on top of it, maybe for some of the live ones, but for a lot of the studio ones, I think they just literally took the actual studio tracks,
Right, yeah.
for like Bohemian Rhapsody and a lot of those. Okay, I completely remembered what my rant was going to be about. It's very minute, but it fucking bugged the shit out of me when they're doing the Bohemian Rhapsody songwriting montage or whatever, and they're like in the studio, and Roger Taylor is in the vocal booth, and they're trying to get him to do the falsettos on like Mamma Mia, and Freddie Mercury just keeps being like higher, higher, higher. He's at the same octave at all those takes that he keeps, like, he doesn't go higher. Like there is no, he wouldn't humanly be able to hit the octave that's higher than that. But Freddie just keeps being like higher. Like, again, it's another example of this movie being written by people who don't actually understand music, who don't actually understand how like songwriting works. Like, it seems like it was written by like dads who are like, oh yeah, and then you know they've got the really high falsettos on like that part. I bet Freddie Mercury was like, tell him to go higher, when like Freddie Mercury, as an accomplished musician, would know that he's not going to go to the octave above that. So him just saying higher, like, that's not how you communicate, like, oh, I want like a better timbre to your voice in that falsetto or whatever, because he just keeps singing all those same takes at the same octave. And I was like, there's like 50% of the population knows how like music works and is going to see right through this scene, and they couldn't find someone to write or direct this movie that understood like how songwriting works, or how, like, you know, just basic octaves of like music work.
I hated the scene where they're at that recording studio and it's kind of like this farm land, and there's a shot of a rooster who's about to crow, but then instead it cuts to somebody being like, Galileo, like, you know, like at a high voice,
I didn't even pick up on that.
instead of a rooster crowing. Like, it was just the most slapstick fucking stupid comedy. Like, just, if you want to talk about a terribly cut movie, it's this movie. There are so many just bad cuts in it. Even when they're touring the fucking country, like the One Direction documentary that I saw in 3D IMAX in a film in like a fucking movie theater looks better than some of this like fucking terrible shit that they've. It's just like, I don't know. Go on.
I don't have a whole lot positive to say about this movie. Like, I think the writing is bad, if not god awful. I think the direction is misguided. Obviously, the production was faulty from, you know, having to fire the director at some point. The ADR is bad. I don't think these are even like good covers of the Queen songs, which is something that you look for in a music biopic, to be like, oh, let's like hear like a reimagining of these ones, you know? Like, I don't want to just hear you playing the songs that I hear on the goddamn radio all the time from Queen. Like, we've heard a million remasterings of it. Like, let's actually get some different voices in here and some, you know, new instrumentation for some of this stuff. And they don't have the balls to do any of that. And like we've said, like they have like these scenes in the movie that seem like responses to our original criticisms of the trailer. You know, where they're just kind of like, oh, let's do a couple of reshoots and throw these scenes in there to fill out, you know, what people were criticizing about the trailer. But it doesn't seem like a movie that understands actual human beings, much less the actual members of Queen. Like, I don't know anything about them after watching this movie. Everything that I understand about Freddie Mercury that I'm also using to criticize this movie, I know from like reading the Wikipedia article, which is like something else that like makes it funny, because it's like it's at the same time this like paint by the numbers biopic that's also like the worst biopic you've ever seen, that can't even play by the real rules of like a biopic. And at the same time, it's this like movie dramatization of the Wikipedia article while also getting the facts of the Wikipedia article wrong, and like not even like getting some of the actual like intricacies that you can get across in the Wikipedia article, just scanning through it like I am. Like it doesn't seem like the type of movie that was someone's passion project as much as Bryan Singer claims that it was. It doesn't seem like something that someone, I mean, if it was Bryan Singer's passion project, that he was, spending more time diddling little kids than he was like working on this movie. We're going to talk about in 2 weeks on a review of like First Man, like Damien Chazelle spent like a lot of time just like watching archival footage, and it ended up like inspiring where he wanted the movie to go. Where it seems like this was a movie that Bryan Singer had an idea for how he wanted to make the movie and didn't let the facts dictate that at all.
Right.
And maybe let like the Queen members dictate too much of the movie. Like it seems too kind to them in like a bad way. Like there's a way to like not necessarily like, like you can make the members of Queen look good by also showing some of their flaws,
Right.
Like, and we know no flaws about Brian May, about John Deacon, or Roger Taylor. So all that being said, I think I'm going to land on a half finger. I think the only good thing I have to say about this is that it made me remember that I like some other Queen songs that I didn't think about before. But I don't think there's good cinematography. I don't think anything's consistent in this. I think the editing's awful. I think the sound direction for a music movie is god awful.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when you take into consideration the ADR. I think the fact that even the times that they did use someone else to reimagine Freddie Mercury's voice, they're not even crediting him correctly.
Yeah.
That makes me feel really weird, and I don't want to give them credit for that. And I think as much as I do like parts of Rami Malek's performance, he's working with a bad script. He's working with weird makeup, and I don't think he is able to overcome the makeup as an actor. And I think that makes me unable to really give him credit for his performance. And he's not even handling the musical aspect of Freddie Mercury. So it's just kind of like, okay, like he had some makeup that made him look like Freddie Mercury, but when he was acting, he couldn't stop licking his teeth or like interacting with the teeth, which is not something that Freddie Mercury would have done. He lived with them his entire life.
Right.
Rami couldn't imagine a reality where those had been his teeth the entire life. And he kind of just fell victim to it. It's like someone like wearing like a fake mustache, like, like they're always interacting with that, it changes the way that your voice sounds. And that's how I felt about Rami Malek in this movie. So I'm going to go with Half Finger. One of the worst movies I saw this year by far.
Yeah. No argument here.
Not A Wrinkle in Time bad, but close.
Right. Yeah.
So that'll obviously even out to one finger for us here on the podcast. Not a whole lot of math required there. What else do we got? We read all the Facebook comments. Obviously, as you heard in the announcement last week, and if you have been skipping over those announcements to the intro, we have a new series that should be out already by the time this drops
this week,
called Goldfingers, and it's a data-driven Oscar prediction video series that we're releasing exclusively on our YouTube. So head to YouTube, search How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up, or go to howmanyfingerspodcast.com and find a direct link. And yeah, I'm going to be taking you like beat by beat through the awards season and trying to predict who's going to be nominated and ultimately who's going to win at the Academy Awards based on precursor awards and my own intuition and some trends and news going on in the movie industry. So I think it's going to be a good time. So check out the first episode. It should be out now. We'll probably have a second episode a couple of weeks later because there's not a lot of precursor awards coming out after that. But we should at least have predictions for documentary and documentary short. So check that episode out now. And anything else you can find at howmanyfingerspodcast.com. Check out a review next week of Mandy with Nick Ocello. We're going to go record that now. And a review the week after that of First Man. Just us.
Just the boys.
The OGs. All right. Whoops. We will see you guys next week. We're going to go eat some pizza. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.